Okay, well, I'm impressed. I am so excited about computers because they reset daylight savings time without me having to think about it. And I'm usually 2 hours late somewhere, either in the spring or the fall, and I never can remember. I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate y'all giving us the time off, and we went on our vacation, and we had a really good time. I want to especially express my thanks to Tim Myers, who preached a couple of Sundays ago, and the tremendous job that he did. I was there for that, and that was an outstanding presentation, outstanding sermon. And then I heard Chris Roberts did just a tremendous job as well on Sunday night. And I'll take a little credit for that because I'm the one that suggested to him. He said, "What should I preach about?" And I said, "Tell everybody what you've learned about God since you've become a father." And so if nothing else, Kaylee was really excited about that. But at any rate, I appreciate that. And also for Dirk, who filled in for me last Sunday. And then Victor on Wednesday, before Sunday, I got an email message from the young man who had agreed to do the sermon, and something had come up. And he said, "I can't be there." And I thought, man, I'm in Philadelphia. What do I do? And so I contacted Victor, and Victor said, "I'll preach the Word of God anytime." And so I really, truly admire his spirit, and I admire his willingness to work, and I appreciate his willingness to do that. I did want to tell you about our vacation. On the first day, maybe not. Maybe you don't want to hear about that. Let's go on into our worship. We were gone 10 days. That's a long story. Jacob's experience of God was anything but easy and fulfilling. He had been driven away from his home. He had been driven away from his mother and father, his brother, looking to kill him. He had gone to a foreign country where he thought that he would find perfect happiness, found the woman of his dreams, but it turned out to only be misery. His father-in-law hated him and wanted to kill him. His wives were at each other's throats, and you can imagine what that would be like if you were coming home every day to two women who were fighting with one another, and they both held your heart. His children were difficult children, and you think, well, most of that was his fault. Yeah, and that's true, but still, hadn't God promised to be with him wherever he went? And now here he is on the banks of the Jabbok Creek, and his enemies are behind him, and he can't go back. And his brother Esau is coming for him, and he knows how much Esau hates him. And Genesis 32:24, so Jacob was left alone. Can you imagine the loneliness? Can you imagine the anguish as he sat there in the dark? And I've always tried to imagine what that was like for him as he's sitting there in the dark. Maybe these eerie eyes staring at him from the edges of his camp, and the spooky things that are moving around out there in the darkness, things going bump in the night. And you wonder, where in the world is God when you need him the most? And suddenly there is this grunt and growl and a blood-curdling cry, and a dark form comes hurtling out of the darkness, and strong hands clamp onto Jacob's throat, and two men now are thrashing through the bushes, struggling desperately, one strong man punching and gouging and throttling. Wrestling is not a polite activity in these early days. It is a matter of life and death. Jacob fighting for his life, and with a mighty blow, this unknown adversary dislocated Jacob's hip, so that Jacob now struggled in agony if he tried to save his own life. And the man said, "Let me go, for it's near daybreak." And you think, well, that's the way it is with those demons, isn't it? They only come in the darkness. They never come in the light. They never come when you're strong. They never come when you're fearless, when you're able. They only come in the darkness, when you're exhausted. And when all of those scary things are creeping around out there, and you just have this sensitivity, and you're scared half out of your mind, where the dangers just seem huge because you can't see them. And Jacob responds, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." I don't know if you're surprised by that. That ought to surprise you. I thought only demons hid in the darkness and scared the daylights out of you and tried to beat you to death. And somehow, as Jacob is wrestling with this man, he figures out this is no demon. This is God. Bless me, Jacob cries out in his anguish, and God blessed him. Your name will no longer be Jacob. Jacob, a name of shame, the supplanter, the deceiver, a grifter, really bad guy. Your name, says God, will be Israel because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. And we read in Genesis 32, so Jacob called the place Peniel. That's a Hebrew word that means the face of God. Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. And the sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Life with God is not always full of sweetness and light. We find ourselves often rolling around in the dirt, in the darkness, wrestling desperately with this God, trying to force a blessing out of him when he seems to want just as badly not to bless us for one reason or another. And sure, sometimes we deserve it just like Jacob did, but sometimes we don't. And sure, we know God is working his purpose, and we know that he's doing things to accomplish something in us that is beyond our imagination. But we can't help but thinking from our limited perspective and limited experience, what in the world is it? How can there be purpose in the death of a child? How can there be purpose in being tortured by some dread disease whose treatment seems to be worse than the sickness? How can there be purpose in my agony, in my suffering? And why do I have to hurt so badly to get that done in the first place? And when will it end? And I keep reading this. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Jesus, this is Jesus. He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them and knelt down and prayed, Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him, and being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Did you catch the order of those verses? I would have thought that it would have been the other way around, that he would have suffered in his anguish, that his sweat was falling like drops of blood, and then an angel came and strengthened him. But that's not the way it is. First, there is the strengthening, and then the drops of blood. And the sun rose above him as he passed Peniel. The face of God. He's walking in front of God, and he is limping because of his hip. In our focus on the Psalms, I think it is very important that we don't get unbalanced in our worship, as though praise is only about blessing and giving thanks and celebrating things, because sometimes praise is about hurting and being sick and being bereaved and finding little relief. Sometimes praise is about the God of thunder who rides on the clouds to rescue us. But sometimes praise seems to be about the God of thunder who turns his back on us in our need and who might even be asleep. For the director of music, to the tune of the doe of the morning, a psalm of David, what are you hoping for next? Oh Lord, what a mighty God you are, how wonderful you've come down and rescued. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my anguish, my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you, our ancestors put their trust. They trusted, and you delivered them. To you, they cried out and were saved. In you, they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him if he wants him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. We're going to turn our attention today to the Psalms of Lament, and I'm sorry about kind of drawing this out, but we don't do this very well. I mean, we think worship is only about happiness and being up and excited and, all of those kinds of things, and we forget sometimes that Psalms, the great majority of Psalms, as a matter of fact, are Psalms of lament, those songs of praise that give form to our suffering, those songs that sometimes accuse God of being harsh toward us and being blind to our pain. Those songs that sometimes accuse God of not caring enough or even of not caring at all. And yet these psalms are psalms. They are songs of praise and faith. Like Jacob, there are those of us who relate most strongly to these psalms like we are wrestling with God, struggling to find some sort of relief, struggling to find some sort of meaning, struggling to find comfort, struggling to find strength to continue on. And we're like Jacob, the sun rose above him as he passed the face of God, and he was limping because of his hip. Lament psalms are really important in our worship, I think. And lament psalms have a pretty well-defined outline, as you might expect, because these psalms are designed to help up people in the throes of chaos. I mean, when absolutely nothing makes sense, when everything is upside down, when the world is a churning mass of nothingness, there is only pain and there's fear and there's confusion. These psalms are designed to help us put things back in order, to get all our ducks in a row, to try to get a handle on things, to try to be able to live life, to give you a firm place to stand, to help you sort things out. And while you may walk with a limp, you are still walking with God in a positive way and not a negative way. So here is the outline of the Psalms of Lament, an outline that we're going to use to shape our worship today. And you'll see that in the bulletin worship outline. First of all, there will be in these Psalms an opening address. It's an address to God. And that makes sense because we are, after all, bound up with God. And Psalms of Lament are not attacking God. They are not giving up on God. They are not turning against God. Psalms of Lament are addressing the God who should be able to do something about this, even if he is not doing it the way that we think he should be doing it adequately at the moment. My God, David says, why have you forsaken me? Then there is a statement of the trouble, describing the situation. But more than that, not just describing the situation, but telling about how I feel about that situation. My anger. You'll read these Psalms and think, wow, that psalmist is really angry. My fear, my despair, my hurt that God hasn't been there the way that I expected him to be. And then there will be the plea or the petition. This is what I want God to do. And that will be followed by the certainty of hearing, an explicit statement that I know God has heard and is concerned and will respond to my plea. Some scholars think that in the middle of Hebrew worship, this is the point at which the priest interrupted the psalm to say, God has heard, and God will respond to you. And that will be followed very closely by the vow of praise, an expression of confidence, and this is what I'm going to do when I will be delivered. This Psalm 13 is one of the best examples of this type of psalm, and so we're going to use Psalm 13. All of this has been introduction up to now, okay? Everything else I have to say is real quick, but I appreciate you bearing with me so that I can kind of orient you about why we're singing what we're singing and why we're reading what we're reading. But Psalm 13 is one of the best examples of this type of psalm, and that's what we're using to start our worship. How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death, and my enemy will say, I have overcome him. And my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise for he has been good to me. God is gone. And maybe in one sense that's what makes our suffering so hard. We know how great God is. Why doesn't he do something about this? But our laments are always rooted in our faith. After all, why cry out to God if he can't do anything or if he isn't even there? We long for better things. We long for relief. We long for understanding. And we refuse to settle for anything less because we know God is great. Stand with me and read, please. You are all, I am leader. Ascribe to the Lord, you heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon leap like a calf, Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of the Lord shakes the desert. The Lord shakes the desert of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists the oaks and strips the forest bare. And in his temple all cry, glory. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord is enthroned as king forever. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. I want you to do something this morning that will be hard, I think. I am going to ask you to be silent in just a moment for 1 minute. 1 minute, I thought about 2 minutes. 1 minute is like an eternity, I think, when you're trying to be silent. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to do a couple of things. Number one, I want you to think about either you, yourself, or someone you know. I want you to think about the pain you're in or the fear you're experiencing or the confusion you have or a situation that's hard for you. Or maybe if your experience right now is not any of those kinds of things, think about somebody you know who is experiencing those things and just kind of try to get into their skin and get into their heart and think about what they are feeling and what they have told you about themselves and what they are experiencing. And then I want you to spend about a minute answering this question. What would you like to say to God about that? Now be careful with that because this is not what would you like to pray. You know, we want to pray relief, give them relief, take away the pain. That's not the question. The question is, what would you like to say to God about that? If God were standing right here, if God were visible, and you could say anything you wanted to say about God, or I'm sorry, anything you wanted to say to God, what would you like to tell him? I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and to think about that for 1 minute, please. Lord, you are the God who saves me. Day and night I cry out to you. May my prayer come before you. Turn your ear to my cry. I am overwhelmed with troubles, and my life draws near to death. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like one without strength. I'm set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more, who are cut off from your care. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. Your wrath lies heavily on me. You have overwhelmed me with all your waves. You have taken from me my closest friends and have made me repulsive to them. I am confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief. I call to you, Lord, every day. I spread out my hands to you. Do you show your wonders to the dead? Do their spirits rise up and praise you? Is your love declared in the grave, your faithfulness in destruction? Are your wonders known in the place of darkness, or your righteous deeds in the land of oblivion? But I cry to you for help, Lord. In the morning my prayer comes before you. Why, Lord, do you neglect me and hide your face from me? From my youth I have suffered and been close to death. I have borne your terrors and am in despair. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. All day long they surround me like a flood. They have completely engulfed me. You have taken from me friend and neighbor. Darkness is my closest friend. And I think the entire Bible teaches us it is never wrong to tell God how you feel. It is never wrong to tell Him how your circumstances are affecting you. It is never wrong to tell Him how much you don't understand, or how afraid you are, or how lonely you feel, or how desperate you are, or how angry you are. It is never wrong to tell Him what you wish He would do about it. Surely we don't want to curse God. We don't ridicule God, or we don't call God names, but we can question, we can explain, we can even demand. Abba, Father, He said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will. I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before Him my complaint. Before Him I tell my trouble. When my spirit grows faint within me, it is you who watch over my way. In the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me. Look and see. There is no one at my right hand. No one is concerned for me. I have no refuge. No one cares for my life. I cry to you, Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of the living. Listen to my cry, for I am in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they are too strong for me. Set me free from my prison, that I may praise your name. Then the righteous will gather about me because of your goodness to me. If there is anything that this supper tells us, it is that God is concerned for us, that God will go to incredible lengths to rescue us. Let this cup pass from me, begged Jesus. But if it's not possible, let your will be done. And it is the Father's will that we be rescued. We reassure each other, kind of in a weird way, don't get your hopes up. Let me tell you what these Psalms are telling you is, get your hopes up. Expect, insist, ask, and keep on asking and keep on wrestling. And we are certain that God hears us, that He is our Father, and He knows, and we know that in His own wise and loving way, He will do something about this. I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. I will glory in the Lord. Let the afflicted hear and rejoice. Glorify the Lord with me. Let us exalt His name together. I sought the Lord, and He answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to Him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. This poor man called, and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear Him, and He delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in Him. Fear the Lord, you, His holy people, for those who fear Him lack nothing. The lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, my children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from telling lies. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and His ears are attentive to their cry. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to blot out their name from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers them from them all. He protects all his bones. Not one of them will be broken. Evil will slay the wicked. Foes of the righteous will be condemned. The Lord will rescue His servants. No one who takes refuge in Him will be condemned. In verse 1, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Paul has described in detail what God has done for us through Jesus, how He has forgiven our sin and refused to hold us accountable for it, how He has sacrificed Jesus in order that forgiveness might be justified, so that no accusation could be thrown at us that we have somehow taken advantage of God. After all, God is so gullible and looks so weak in forgiving us. He has talked about how God has proved to us His good purposes by loving us to the degree that He would sacrifice His Son for us. And He has described to us how He has had mercy on us when we certainly deserved the most severe and eternal punishments. And so Paul says, in light of those mercies, let me go backwards here, not forward. In light of God's mercies, respond to His love. Give yourself as a living sacrifice. He says, this is the only logical thing to do. And that's really what he says there at the end of verse 1. The NIV says, this is your true and proper worship. The Greek implies that this is what reasonable people would do. When you hear about God's mercy toward you, when you experience his mercies, and he puts that in the plural, not in the singular the way it is in the NIV, but when you see the things God has done for you, it's only reasonable, it's only logical that you would respond by making yourself a living sacrifice. And after all, it is logical to do that. I mean, when someone does you a good turn, it makes no sense to turn against them and then insult their kindness and their goodness. And surely we wouldn't want to do that to God. And he goes on to say, Paul goes on to say in verse 2, that when we refuse to be shaped by the evil world around us and instead are transformed, and that word transformed is the same word that's used in the Gospels when Jesus is transfigured, when his heavenly glory broke through his earthly existence and the apostles saw him for who he really was. Paul says we too are transfigured from the image of the world to the image of Christ. And then he says we will prove the goodness of God's will, that it is good and pleasing and perfect. And I think Paul is saying, and you're going to prove to yourself that God's will is good. You're going to experience it as a good thing, and the world is going to see it too. Now, our response to God is not some sort of quid pro quo. You know, when we read these Psalms and the psalmists are asking for answers and they're promising that they will do certain things when God answers, it is not as though it is tit for tat. It is not as though they're saying, if God will be nice to me, then I will be nice to God, or even the opposite of that. If I do nice things for God, then God, you're supposed to do nice things for me. But what it is talking about is that our taking up God and his ways are the logical, natural outcome of what God is doing in us and through us. It only makes sense because that is what God is doing in us. What if God doesn't respond? What if he doesn't answer my prayer? What if I keep on hurting and keep on suffering? I think Job's experience speaks to that. The entire book of Job is about Job's frustration with God because things are not working out the way Job expected. And Job will say over and over again, just let God come down here. Boy, just let God speak to me face to face, and I'll tell him a thing or two. I'll explain to him. I'll tell him how unfair and how unjust this is. I'll tell him how wrong he is. I'll tell him what I expect of him and what he needs to do. And then God appears. And Job says, surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now and I will speak. I will question you and you will answer me. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore, I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. You understand that the message of the book of Job really is not what we often make it out to be. Why do bad things happen to good people? The message of the book of Job is God is worth my commitment whether things go well for me or not. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. For in the day of trouble he will keep me safe in his dwelling. He will hide me in the shelter of his sacred tent and set me high upon a rock. Then my head will be exalted above the enemies who surround me. At his sacred tent I will sacrifice with shouts of joy. I will sing and make music to the Lord. Hear my voice when I call, Lord. Be merciful to me and answer me. My heart says of you, seek his face. Your face, Lord, I will seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You've been my helper. Do not reject me or forsake me, God, my Savior. Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. Teach me your way, Lord. Lead me in a straight path because of my oppressors. Do not turn me over to the desire of my foes, for false witnesses rise up against me, spouting malicious accusations. I remain confident of this: I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. Now, you may have come to a decision about God this morning that the only logical thing you can do is to give your life to Him out of respect for who He is and what He has done for you. And you may have decided that today is the time when you must confess your faith and be baptized into the death of Jesus. And so now is the time. Come and let us know that you want to do that, and we will do it this morning. Let's stand and sing, and if you want to come, please come.